After 1932, there was division not only between the military and the politicians, but within the military itself. This further destabilized the political situation at the time and would ultimately lead to the establishment of a military government and the descent into what the Japanese call the Dark Valley. Although some generals did not want to replace the government with a military junta, there was growing momentum behind the militarist groups that did. There were two key groups that wanted more influence for the military: the Kodoha, or the Imperial Way faction, and the Tosei-ha, which were also known as the Control faction. Both of these groups, though, were imperialist and wanted Japanese expansionism. However, the Kodoha was generally more radical of the two. The Kodoha faction believed in a military dictatorship that would deliver state socialism. Its leading officers viewed the Soviet Union as Japan's main enemy. They saw war with the Soviet Union as inevitable and the conquest of Manchuria as the first step towards this. They emphasized national spirit over material force. The Tosei-ha were against terrorism and the use of force to remove the government. They wanted to use legal means to foster military power and influence over the government. They did not see war with the Soviet Union as inevitable and wanted to maintain good relations with the Soviets. Their objective was the conquest of China, which would require a modernization of the army and industry as well as the mobilization of the whole nation. As part of this internal conquest for Japan, three major assassination plots destabilized the government between 1932 and 1936. One of these took place in May 1932 when a number of Army and Navy officers attacked banks, party officers, and the police headquarters in Tokyo. Prime Minister Inukai was shot and killed. The trial of the conspirators demonstrated widespread support for their actions and a general disillusionment with the ruling political parties. Therefore, the May 15th incident, as it became known, enhanced the influence of the army and further undermined the democratic government. The subsequent governments of Admiral Saito and Admiral Okada were interim governments during which the army played out its power struggle between the Kodoha and the Tosei-ha factions. Admiral Saito's government, which lasted from May 1932 to July 1934, seemed to favor the Kodoha faction as it appointed three of its leaders into high positions. However, Saito took a firm stance against the Kodoha's radical factions, and after a plot against him was discovered, he promoted a member of the Tosei-ha to Minister of War. Admiral Okada, who took over in July 1934. During his leadership, the Kodoha produced a publication promoting the idea that the army should control the economy. When a Kodoha minister was sacked for not keeping control of his young officers, a Kodoha officer assassinated the leader of the Tosei-ha, General Nagata. There was sympathy for the assassin at his trial, but he was found guilty and executed. In response, a group of young Kodoha officers attempted a revolt to seize power in February 1936. 1,500 soldiers marched into Tokyo and took over the parliament buildings, the war office, police headquarters, and the prime minister's residence. They brutally murdered many officials. News of their attempted and bloody coup went around the world. 15 of the key murderers were tried in secret and shot. The Kodoha faction was discredited. From then on, members of the Tosei-ha faction were most important in developing army planning, and this meant that the army would now take firmer control of the country. Admiral Okada resigned after the attempted coup, and Hiroto Koki became prime minister. From the start, he was weak and had to make compromises with the military, including agreeing to pursue a strong foreign policy. In May 1936, he agreed that the ministers for the Army and Navy had to be serving officers. He later agreed to a 7-point program for the Army, which basically handed control of the government to the military. Hiroto agreed to expand arms production and support the army in Manchuria. He also signed the Anti-Comintern Pact with Hitler in November 1936. When the National Diet declared its alarm at the direction the military was taking, the government was brought down. The government of General Hayashi was in power between February and June 1937. The Diet was the only instrument of power left that attempted to limit the military's power. However, its politicians were divided. In June 1937, Prince Konoha took over as prime minister, and it was hoped that with his long political experience, he could unite the nation politically. Konoha wanted to restrain the army, but it was soon apparent that he would not be able to. The Tosei-ha faction was dominant in the government, and expansion in China was their objective. A leading Tosei-ha general, General Tojo, became chief of staff to the Kwantung Army in July 1937. Within 6 weeks of Konoha taking power, Japan's army commanders had ordered the invasion of China. Konoha was powerless to halt it.